I think there is a lot of ignorance, both with doctors and patients in Ukraine. The two things need to be better. One is there needs to be more education, better education. For doctors particularly, what we call postgraduate education, when they've finished medical school, but when they're starting to train as specialists. That's the system here is still the old Soviet system, and it's rubbish. You can become a specialist in 2 years after purely theoretical training. So there needs to be a serious overhaul of postgraduate medical education in Ukraine. The second problem is the old problem of money and corruption. Ukraine is still a very corrupt country, and because doctors are paid so little in the government healthcare system, they have to be paid money by patients under the table, and that leads to corruption, and somehow that problem there are no easy answers to that. But the evidence is very clear all over the world that if doctors get paid more for doing more doctoring, it leads to unnecessary treatment. There are many good doctors, but there'll be enough not very good doctors who will be, because they want to make more money, they will do more tests, more scans, more x-rays, more operations than is really necessary. If the medicines are harmless, like homeopathy is on the whole, and if the patients are not being exploited financially, the placebo effect is a very important part of medical practice, and I've no objection to that. There are problems, however, if the placebo treatments are powerful drugs or antibiotics, for instance, then it is more difficult to justify. But I think if patients are happy with placebo treatments, well, that's all right, provided they don't have to pay too much money for them. But of course, it can easily lead to patients being exploited. The level of medical understanding of patients in Ukraine is not very good. And for instance, in Europe and America, if a patient has a stroke, we know there is really very little drug treatment which will help them recover. The treatment is essentially rehabilitation and physiotherapy. But in Ukraine, the family are told they must buy all these drugs, which we know don't work, which have been shown in the scientific trials do not work. But perhaps the drug companies are still advertising them in Ukraine, and doctors and patients believe in pills and tablets and want to take them. Well, that is an educational problem, and it takes a long time to change that. There is no quick answer. I think trying to be as honest as possible is always important. There is a problem in Britain with the media that they're constantly saying, oh, there's a big new breakthrough in cancer or a big new breakthrough in Alzheimer's, and you have big headlines in the newspaper, or they say a big medical disaster. And the media reporting of medical issues in Britain is not very good. It is very important for medical and scientific journalists to be as accurate and scientific as possible, even though it's unrealistic good news or terrible bad news which sells newspapers. Bad news makes for good headlines, It is a question of balance. Journalists need to think, carefully. You do not want to raise false hopes. All the time, journalists and a few doctors are saying, oh, there's a wonderful new treatment for cancer, and then all these people dying from cancer feel, I will be okay. And it is very cruel to raise false hopes like that. So the journalists must be careful and accurate in what they say. Expectations and hope are very, very powerful drugs. A pain is much easier to tolerate if you believe it is going to get better. And storytelling is partly about trying to influence people's hope and expectations. And when you try to explain to a patient or a family a difficult decision about whether to do a dangerous operation or not, or to use an unpleasant chemotherapy, sometimes perhaps it is better to talk in terms of stories about what has happened to other patients rather than just talk in statistical percentage terms. As you say, as human beings, we understand stories better than statistics. That's a big question. There is a lot of excitement about targeted chemotherapy for cancer based on genomics. Yes, it is achieving some progress, but not in cancer, not big changes. The targeted therapies often work for a few months and then they stop. Cancer is 1,000 different diseases and is evolving. In the same patient, the cancer will change genetically all the time. So it's very complicated, and the more research that goes on into cancer, the more complicated it becomes. So no, there's no miracle cure around the corner. Something pleasant. I'm very, in Ukraine, I mean this seriously, I'm very impressed at the way there is a new class of educated, Western-looking young people. I only meet a selected number of people. I don't go out into the countryside, I don't go over into the east. But in the almost 30 years I've been coming to Ukraine, I mean, there is a whole new educated class of young people, and they are the future of Ukraine, which is why I feel optimistic about the future, even though it is still very difficult. And I think Dr. Suprun has been trying to do very good things with healthcare reform, and the fact she has met so much opposition shows how difficult these things can be, but necessary if you want a better country.